All right, so I watched this video, this debate on the problem of evil with Cosmic, Skeptic, and Inspiring Philosophy. I've only watched about a half hour of it thus far, and I'll probably do more than one video on it because there's a lot in what I just watched. There's a lot that can be broken down. But one of the things that Cosmic Skeptic does, and if he does it, there's basically almost no hope for anyone in the atheist community. Why? Because that's one of the sharper tools in the shed. That's a pretty first-rate philosophically speaking. He's pretty sharp. And he does something that's like borderline inane, that I've never heard anybody who has argued the problem of evil do anything other than, which is he comes up with a theodicy, which is completely inane, doesn't they really think clearly about it and recognize how it's inane, and then says this is how it's got to be. If there really were a God, in other words, I didn't say that all. You didn't say that all well, Craig. Okay, what do I mean? So, one of the things that he says, okay, a couple of things. First of all, I don't really believe that there is a problem of evil. I honestly don't. The premise of the problem of evil is that if there were a sovereign God in charge, we wouldn't see as much evil as we see. Now, he starts arguing against a philosophical framing by Leibniz, of all people, with that this is the best of all possible worlds. In other words, if there is a sovereign God in charge, guys, then God is sovereign over the world, and we see exactly as much evil as God would allow. Exactly as much evil as God would allow, and this would be the best of all possible worlds. So he goes, how could it possibly be if there was a Holocaust? Well, the actual argument about the Bible, okay, yes, there was a Holocaust, but the actual argument about the Bible is such is the moral condition of man's heart, the heart is desperately wicked, who can know it, that there could have easily been a Holocaust every 10 years. See, he actually argues that there's all these things going on. Like, why didn't God stop them in the Holocaust? Why didn't God stop them from firing their guns in this particular instance? And he uses a book that I highly recommend to make part of his case. The book is called Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. And that's a really interesting book to choose to make the case about the problem of evil. Why? Because if you actually read the book, the guy was in Auschwitz. Two books I'd recommend on the Holocaust. Survival in Auschwitz and Man's Search for Meaning. Now, Survival in Auschwitz, a lot of you are going to pick up, you're not going to be able to handle. This is harrowing. It's unbelievable. Primo Levi, Italian Jew, gets thrown into Auschwitz. But even in that book, okay, he doesn't say there is no moral agency amongst the prison guards. Matter of fact, a key point of that book is even in hell on earth, people are making moral choices. There are guards that you avoid because all they do is beat you, and they'll beat you to death. And there are the other guards who treat you kind of like a human being. They're not out to hurt you. They may even give you a spare slice of bread. They have some compassion for you. His words in the Holocaust, in Auschwitz. His words. Moral agency is involved. Every step of the way. Then in Man's Search for Meaning, the book that Cosmic Skeptic references, the guy's ultimately finds in the Holocaust, in a concentration camp in Auschwitz, I think it was Auschwitz, I forget if it was actually Auschwitz, has a revelation that love governs the universe. How on earth do you have a revelation? That's his revelation, not mine. Cosmic Skeptic didn't really read that part. Love governs the universe. How on earth do you have a revelation like that, a heart revelation like that, if it's not in some way really true? The argument of the Christian is that God is sovereign. And yes, God is allowing a lot of evil, but God is allowing only as much evil, only up to a certain point. As the book of Job says, go this far, but no further. The Holocaust had a beginning, middle, end. The Holocaust had a beginning, middle, and end. The Bible argues that that is the moral condition of man's hearts. God removes his sovereign hand, and that's what we do to each other. Man turns from wolf. Man turns into wolf against other men. Man is wolf to man, as the saying goes, when God removes his sovereign hand. Nazis were not obeying the commands of God. This is my command, that you love one another. Nazis were not listening to that. And the most powerful part of the book is Survival in Auschwitz. This is an atheist making this. He starts condemning them along religious lines. Swear to God. It sounds like an Old Testament prophet. He goes to Jeremiah against them. So it's going, build your towers that are a mockery of God and man. And one day the day of reckoning will come. That's what he says, an atheist. He sounds like an Old Testament, he sounds like Isaiah or Jeremiah. Now, his argument, Cosmic Skeptic's argument, is that why wouldn't God stop a whole bunch of this stuff? And how do we know? Then he shows the weakness in his own argument like 3 sentences later. How do we know God didn't? We don't. If you trust in the character of God, you assume that God did stop a whole bunch of things. That if God is actually sovereign, he's been protecting us. And there was only one Holocaust in Europe as opposed to 10. And last time I checked, the Nazis lost. Last time I checked, the Nazis lost. If there were no God, I don't think that they necessarily would have. A lot of key coincidences. If you start investigating the actual history of the world we live in, and just presuppose, okay, maybe God did intervene here and there, and start looking for coincidences and quote-unquote miracles, you'll find hundreds in World War II. There were no God. It was just mechanistic devices that ran the universe, just natural laws running the universe, okay? The Nazis started out winning. They started out winning, and at the beginning of the first year and a half of the war, they were winning big. I swear to God, they were winning big. Key pivotal turning point was called the Battle of Britain. And this is just one instance where if you're actually looking for evidence of a sovereign hand, it's there. Okay, the Nazis, the Battle of Britain, they're attacking the British airfields. If they continue in the Battle of Britain, they just keep going after the airfields, eventually they will knock out the English Air Force. And they will dominate the skies over England. And then they will be able to bomb them, into the Stone Age and invade England. But a key thing happens. Hitler decides to change strategy to focus on bombing London. Why? What a weird coincidence. A plane flies over Berlin, an English plane bombs Berlin, so he gets mad, takes it personally, starts bombing London. Starts what's known as the London Blitz. Now, it was terrifying to live through, but strategically it was totally useless. Had they kept going and bombing the airfields, they would have eventually knocked out all the English Air Force and won the Battle of Britain. That's only one coincidence. The key retreat that you may have heard of in history is called the Miracle of Dunkirk. Miracle of Dunkirk. That's what it's called by the historians, not by I. Craig Reed. Not by I. Craig Reed and my fellow religiotards. That's what it's called in the history books. Look it up. The Miracle of Dunkirk. Again, another weird Kismet type experience. The English army is right up against the English Channel. And, they're surrounded. And instead of taking them out with the panzers and the foot armies, Goering convinces him to let them be bombed by the Air Force, giving them the chance to escape. It's called the Miracle of Dunkirk because they mobilized hundreds of ships. You might have seen the movie Dunkirk. It's okay. It's nowhere near as good as I thought it was going to be. Gosh, I was so excited to see that movie. And it's only all right. I wasn't crazy about it. I was expecting like the best movie I've ever seen in my life, and it wasn't even close. I was expecting the first half hour of Saving Private Ryan for the entire movie. I thought it was going to be like movie heaven. I was so excited when I heard that movie was being made, and it was just, wasn't that crazy about it. But the historical event is called the Miracle of Dunkirk. If you are looking for evidence of God, a sovereign hand ruling over the universe, look no further than those two things I just told you about. The Nazis didn't win World War II, guys, and they were winning. If there's no God in charge, how on earth did they lose? And if you study the history of World War II, there's hundreds of weird coincidences. Look at the Battle of Midway. There's a mysterious, why we won the Battle of Midway. There's a ship that they don't see. Mysterious coincidence. The one that was at sea when they attacked Pearl Harbor. Another mysterious coincidence. Key reason why the Nazis lost Barbarossa is Operation Barbarossa is they delayed. For some mysterious reason, they decided to delay for 2 months. To invade Greece, putting the invasion off so they get bogged down in the Russian winter. couple key strategic mistakes Hitler makes all along the way. If he didn't make them, they would have won. They were winning. They were winning big at the beginning. I mean, I'm not saying that that's proof positive that there's a God, but there is tons of evidence that there's all this evil in the world, and there'd be thousands, unimaginable, much worse if God decided to remove his sovereign hand over things. The idea that this evil condemns God is fallacious. It condemns us. Why? It's our doing. We're responsible. Now, the only thing he argues, I sidetracked for a second on the Miracle at Dunkirk. They actually started by praying in England, fasting and praying. Go look it up, promise. I wouldn't make up that detail. A national call to prayer, and they mobilize all these little ships and all these boats, and they evacuate the huge chunk of the English army. Had Goering not talked Hitler into letting him use the Air Force to wipe them out, they would have moved in with tanks and they would have wiped out the English army. And that would have been it. World War II would have been over within the second year of the war. Before the second year of the war. There were a lot of moments like that in World War II. A lot. Go look at, Stalingrad. Same idea. A lot of it had to do with the stubbornness of Adolf Hitler. It sounds very similar to, God hardened his heart so he would make mistakes. Where'd you hear that one before? Where'd you hear that one? Stalingrad. Instead of retreating with this German 6th Army, okay, I think it was 600,000 strong when they started invading Stalingrad. Instead of retreating, the generals were trying to convince them to break out. While it was still an intact army, he decides to stay there and fight. God hardens his heart. Why? Because Stalin was on the name of the city. Where'd you hear that one before? The idea that evil exists and that's evidence against God is fallacious. The fact that good, and we all sort of believe deep down in our heart of hearts, even most of you atheists, operate on the presupposition that good will ultimately triumph over evil. Well, how on earth could that possibly be unless there's a sovereign God? Can't be. Most of you operate under presupposition that life is good and worth living, and that good will ultimately triumph over evil. How could that possibly be unless there is a sovereign God? Not arguing that there isn't evil in the world. Okay, so getting back to his argument. The only argument he makes that's actually mysterious, because free will does solve it. Free will does solve why there are holocausts and why there are things like that. People do that. They want to do that. That is the mystery of evil, the mystery of iniquity that is in the world. That's what the Bible calls it. It's the mystery of evil in the human heart. It's not a mystery as to why God allows it. The bigger mystery is why people want to do it. Go read Survival in Auschwitz and look at what man will do to man, and wonder at how evil and corrupt human beings actually are. In violation of the commands of a holy God. This is my command, that you love one another. So that's not God's fault. That's our fault. So the only real mystery is the one that he latches upon, because he starts talking about natural evil. Why is there suffering? Because that's the only one that that's hard to compute, hard to square. Why does God allow a tidal wave that takes out the just and the unjust? Why does God allow, an earthquake? Nobody caused that as far as we know. Now, this is where an actual theodicy comes into play. And, this really can't be argued with atheists, because there are the argument from the Bible. First of all, the argument from the Bible is that if you are on board and you are on God's squad, you are heading for glory, where there will be no evil, no sorrow, no sickness, and no death from now until the end of time. So you will live in a world that perfectly matches the will of the Father. That's where you're going. Forever. And there will be no evil in that world. That's what the Christian theology is positing. And the Christian theology also admits that there's tons of evil in this world. That you may be delivered from this present evil world. That's what the Bible calls it. A present evil world. Because people are listening to the desires of their own hearts and being deceived by them, instead of listening to God and doing what God would have them do. Nazis are a perfect case in point. Now, what was I going to say? Yeah, I'm rambling a little, but, it's fruitful. fruitful, deal with it. Okay, so the only real question from the atheist is, why is there natural evil? And I'm not sure this can be argued with an atheist. Because once you start getting into like, there are certain couple of things that are beyond the purview of somebody who will not allow for spiritual interpretations of the world. If you are only looking at, materialism and naturalism, then the idea that the world would be corrupted, according to a theological interpretation of the world we live in, it's not just, natural evils that people obviously do that are the source of evil. It is also the sin. It is also, basically, the fall is arguing that the entire natural world is somewhat corrupted. Now, if you think that spiritual idea is too far-fetched, keep in mind that anybody listening to me who's an atheist or a secular person, almost all of you believe in climate change, correct? Man-made climate change. So the idea that moral choices of human beings can dramatically affect the natural world is not out of the realm of what you understand to be possible. You understand it perfectly in a different context. Why I would never bother arguing that in a debate is because an atheist would just pretend not to understand that for the purposes of a debate. Just play dumb. Can't be. But you can all of you think of an example where you not only think it can be, but you think it is. I'm not sure if I said that all that well. All the secular people listening to me, almost all of you believe in man-made climate change, right? Okay, that's a perfect example of how moral choices of humans on the ground floor can affect the actual world, the natural order of things. The Bible is only arguing that that happens in other places too. So the tidal wave is part of a fallen world. There are going to be no tidal waves that take people out in heaven when we're all in paradise, living, forever and ever and ever. Amen. There's going to be no tidal waves that come and secretly take everybody out. So you're not going to have to doubt about the character of the Creator. What it all amounts to is, I doubt the character of God. I doubt the character of God. How could God allow us to live in a world that is this evil? That's what Cosmic Skeptic says. But it's more telling about Cosmic Skeptic. Why? Because he doesn't actually think the world is as evil as he says in his argument. No atheist ever does. No atheist ever does. It's why these arguments, like every atheist argument, are borderline fallacious, if not outright falsehoods. There's not a single atheist I know who is in despair over life right now. Not a single atheist I know who doesn't think that life is a net positive, who isn't making plans for a future tomorrow, 20 years from now, who doesn't have stuff that he genuinely loves and appreciates in the here and now. Actual evidence of the benevolence of God, if God exists. In other words, almost every atheist I know falsifies this argument to a lot. They gin up all the evils that they read about. Not a single one of you has ever made an argument from evil from inside of a concentration camp. Have you? No. Have you made an argument from evil from inside of the cancer ward? Some of you maybe. God forbid. But overall, no. You are making arguments from evil while you are just noticing all of the evil of the world and pinning that all on God and not noting any of the benevolence that you directly experience. If God is actually sovereign, then every good thing you've ever had in your entire life is from His hand, even though you spit in His face for the last 5-10 years. Every good thing you've ever experienced in your entire life is from His hand, even though you have spat in His face for the last 10-20 years, if you're an atheist. And, if you're a Christian too, a lot of you Christians do, shut up. Yes, you do. Yes, you do, shut up. So you see what I'm getting at? The argument from evil is ultimately as false and misleading as every other atheist, quote-unquote, argument against the existence of God. If God exists and God is sovereign, then God has done us enormous amounts of good. The argument that this is the best of all possible worlds is not fallacious. It's actually what this is, the best of all possible worlds, given the moral condition of mankind, because that's what we were supposed to learn from the Nazis. One, science can't save us. Why? The Nazis were just as good as our scientists. Nazi scientists were the equivalent. Two, culture can't save us. Why? The Nazis were, that was a first world nation, equivalent to England, equivalent to the United States. There is a barbarism and an insanity that is underneath the surface, buried deep inside the heart of every man, including like the good people. That's a part and part. The Nazism and genocides were not perpetrated by monsters beamed down from outer space. They were perpetrated by human beings, flesh and blood, real human beings, just like you and me. That's basically the argument of the Bible. That's what we actually truly are, left to our own devices. That's what we are capable of, left to our own devices. Even within the context of a Holocaust, moral agency was involved. There were choices involved. And a guy who was put in a concentration camp, that's the real meaning. That's the real meaning of Man's Search for Meaning. Go read the book for yourself. Don't listen to Cosmic Skeptic. Use it to malign the character of God, because the author of the book, who was in the concentration camp, doesn't do that. He comes to the exact opposite conclusion. Somehow, in the midst of pure evil and pure suffering, he comes to the conclusion deep in his heart that love governs the universe. Promise, go read the book. How could you possibly come to that conclusion unless it's true? That's just the first thing that enters my mind. I'm not saying that that's the argument. I'm just saying, think of it. But the next time you were thinking, see, there's so much evil, why did God allow the Holocaust? God didn't allow the Nazis to win, when they easily could have, and they were winning. That's the point. If there actually is a sovereign God, then he has done almost everybody listening to me nothing but good. Nothing but good. Yeah, you got struggles. I got so many struggles in life. I hear your pain, man. You don't understand, Greg. Yeah, it's been really hard for you. I understand. But you do recognize that whoever's listening to me, in world historical terms, we have it better than probably anybody else on the face of this earth. So, yeah, I'm rambling a little, and I'll probably just post this as a ramble-a-thon. I'll go back and do it's a ramble-a-thon. I'm rambling. Ramble on! I'll do a full analysis of their debate in another video. I just wanted to get that out there. What the argument that Cosmic Skeptic puts forth is very similar to almost every other atheist I've ever heard argue the problem of evil. And the problem isn't the problem of evil. The problem is the inane theodicy out of the mouth of the atheists. Every single solitary atheist I know has hope for tomorrow. Thinks that they live in a world that is better, that has a promise of a better tomorrow. Has love for their family. Is building on something that they can't wait till they get. I can't wait till I build this project 2 years from now. If you lived in a world that was evil as the one you were talking about in your debates, you wouldn't be surviving emotionally. So it's not a real argument. It's coming from a place of complete misrepresentation of how you actually experience the life that you live. You experience it as mostly benevolent, mostly positive, a lot of good, profound good. All the atheists listening to me, that's true of. Correct? You are experiencing a life that you yourself know deep in your heart or live out as, this is good. Can't wait to do this good thing. Can't believe how much I love my kids and my wife. I love my wife, Craig. Well, get a cool wife. It's not that hard. So the argument doesn't ring true. It doesn't ring true. It doesn't actually ring true to what you are authentically experiencing in this world. Because most of you are experiencing mostly good. So, that's how I see it, kids. That's all for now. Mass has ended. Go in peace. Amen.